The Shroud of Turin, Jonathan Rumi, Divine Mystery and the Face of Christ. A testimony wrapped in linen. There are relics that rest quietly in museums. Relics that whisper of ancient empires and forgotten wars. But then, there are relics that defy history itself. Relics that look back at you and seem to ask a question of your soul. The Shroud of Turin belongs to this latter category. A simple piece of linen stretching over 14 feet in length, yet imprinted with the faint image of a crucified man. For centuries, pilgrims have stood before it, trembling, wondering, could this be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ? Jonathan Rumi, the actor known worldwide for portraying Jesus in The Chosen, recently spoke about this sacred mystery. In his words, the shroud does not merely belong to history, nor even to the church as artifact. It belongs to Christ himself, and through him it belongs to every soul who seeks him. Rumi's testimony adds a modern voice to a centuries-old dialogue between faith and doubt, mystery and reason, science and revelation. The shroud, like Rumi's portrayal of Christ, carries an uncanny power. It is not only an object to be studied, it is an encounter to be lived. To gaze upon its image is to stand on holy ground where the silence of linen speaks louder than sermons, and where the faint marks of blood become verses of a gospel written without ink. This article will explore the Shroud of Turin not merely as history, but as spiritual event. We will walk through its mysterious journey across centuries, its confrontations with science, its resonance in the faith of millions, and its echo in the words of Jonathan Rumi. Most of all, we will ask, what does this shroud reveal about Christ and about ourselves? The shroud's mysterious journey through time. The shroud is no ordinary cloth. Its history is a tale woven with secrecy, devotion, fire, and survival, almost as if the fabric itself resists oblivion. 1.1 Edessa, the hidden cloth. The earliest whispers of the shroud point to Edessa, a city once nestled in Mesopotamia. Ancient tradition speaks of a mysterious cloth known as the Mandelion, said to bear the face of Christ, not made by human hands. Was this the same shroud folded so only the visage was visible? Many historians and believers think so. Whether or not the Mandelion and the shroud are identical, the story suggests that from the earliest centuries, Christians guarded an image they believed carried the presence of Christ himself. 1.2 Constantinople relic of empire. By the 6th century, records tell of such a cloth venerated in Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Pilgrims wrote of gazing upon an image of the crucified Christ, etched not by pigment, but by mystery. The emperors themselves paraded the cloth as a shield of the city, a relic believed to protect against invasion and disaster. Yet history is cruel. During the Fourth Crusade in 1204, the city was looted, and the cloth vanished from imperial sight. Where did it go? Into the shadows of Europe, carried perhaps by knights who did not understand what they held, or hidden by hands that knew all too well. 1.3 Leary and the first public display. The shroud re-emerged in the 14th century in the French village of Liray. A small church displayed the linen to crowds who wept and prayed before its ghostly figure. From the beginning, it drew both devotion and controversy. Some hailed it as the burial cloth of Christ. Others, skeptical clergy included, questioned its origins. Yet devotion only grew. People walked barefoot for miles to see it, to kneel before it, to let their tears soak the earth beneath it. 1.4 Fires and survival in Turin. Eventually, the shroud passed into the hands of the House of Savoy and was moved to Turin, Italy, where it has remained for centuries. Here, too, it faced trials. In 1532, a fire broke out in the chapel where it was stored. Flames melted part of the reliquary, and molten silver dripped onto the folded cloth, leaving a series of symmetrical burns that scar it to this day. And yet, astonishingly, the image itself was spared. As if the fire could touch the edges, but not the mystery. Through wars, revolutions, and skepticism, the shroud endured. Today it rests in Turin's Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, rarely displayed guarded with solemn care. And still, every time it is shown, millions flock to behold it, as though drawn by an unseen magnet. 5. The linen that refuses to fade. What is it about this cloth that makes it so indestructible, not only physically but spiritually? Fires have licked its edges, critics have dismissed it, scientists have tested it, yet it refuses to vanish. Instead, with every century, its presence grows stronger. Like the voice of Christ himself, it cannot be silenced. Jonathan Rumi touched on this when he said, "It belongs to Jesus." In other words, the shroud cannot be claimed by skeptics or devotees by emperors or scientists. It resists ownership because it is not property. It is testimony. And testimony belongs not to those who guard it, but to the one it reveals. Jonathan Rumi's testimony, a modern voice among ancient echoes. Jonathan Rumi has become for millions the most recognizable face of Jesus in our generation. Through his role in The Chosen, he has not only portrayed Christ with dignity and humanity, but has also inspired viewers to rediscover their faith. When Rumi speaks about the Shroud of Turin, therefore his words carry a weight beyond celebrity. They come from an artist who has stepped, however imperfectly, into the sandals of the Savior. 2.1. Encountering the mystery. Rumi described the shroud as something that belongs to Jesus. For him, it is not just an ancient artifact, nor even a relic to be guarded by the church. It is a mirror of Christ's passion, a window into his suffering, and a silent proclamation of his resurrection. Rumi, who has spent years meditating on the agony and mercy of Christ through his performance, sees in the shroud not history's puzzle, but faith's answer. He once remarked that standing before the shroud is like standing at Calvary itself. The faint blood stains speak louder than any dialogue, and the bruised face, hidden in linen, looks back at you with a question, "Who do you say that I am?" For Rumi, the shroud is not meant to end debate. It is meant to awaken the heart. 2. The shroud and the actor's burden. Portraying Jesus is a task few actors dare to take on. Rumi has spoken often of the spiritual weight he feels, the fear of misrepresenting Christ, the challenge of embodying both tenderness and majesty, and the constant awareness that his performance can never capture the fullness of the divine. Yet when he reflects on the shroud, he finds consolation. The face in the shroud, he says, is the true performance, the one that speaks without words. For an actor used to cameras, scripts, and rehearsals, the shroud offers something radically different: authenticity, beyond artistry. It reminds him and us that Jesus' suffering was not staged. It was real. The nails pierced, the thorns tore, the blood spilled. No reenactment, however moving, can equal the silent sermon preached by that linen. 2.3. The shroud as personal call. Rumi insists that the shroud is not merely about Jesus 2,000 years ago. It is about us today. When he says it belongs to Jesus, he means that it belongs to the ongoing mission of Christ in the world, to call each heart to conversion, to forgiveness, to surrender. To stand before the shroud is to be invited into the story, to realize that his wounds were born for you. In this sense, Rumi joins a long line of witnesses, saints, mystics, pilgrims, popes, all who have looked upon the shroud and felt it look back at them. His voice is modern, but the echo is ancient.
With this offering,
the linen, centuries old, still speaks today. Science and mystery. The shroud resists. Explanation. For centuries, scientists, historians, and skeptics have tried to solve the riddle of the shroud. How was the image made? When was the cloth woven? Could it be a forgery? A medieval trick designed to inspire devotion or profit? Yet the more the shroud is studied, the more mysterious it becomes. 3.1. The negative image of 1898. In 1898, Italian photographer Secondo Pia took the first photographs of the shroud. When he developed the plates, he nearly dropped them in shock. The faint, ghostly figure on the cloth appeared in stunning detail. In the negative image, the bruised face, the scourged body, the rivulets of blood. It was as though the cloth had been waiting for modern eyes to reveal its depth. A medieval forger could never have conceived of such a phenomenon centuries before photography existed. This discovery sparked a century of investigation. Scientists analyzed the fibers, chemists tested the stains, forensic experts studied the wounds. Each discipline brought insights, but none offered a final explanation. 3.2. The blood of the crucified. Chemical tests confirmed that the reddish stains on the shroud were not paint or pigment, but real human blood. More precisely, blood of type AB, rare globally, but common in the Middle East. Forensic analysis of the flows showed consistency with wounds inflicted by Roman crucifixion nails through the wrists, scourging marks across the back, and blood trails on the forehead consistent with a crown of thorns. Skeptics asked, could a medieval artist really have known such anatomical detail centuries before forensic science? Could he have depicted blood flows exactly as they would appear on a crucified man? The evidence pushed back against skepticism, leaving more questions than answers. 3. The carbon dating controversy. In 1988, 3 laboratories performed radiocarbon dating on a sample of the cloth. The results pointed to the Middle Ages, suggesting a date between 1260 and 1390. Newspapers blared, "Shroud proven a fake." Yet almost immediately, problems emerged. The sample tested came from a corner of the cloth that had been repaired after the 1532 fire woven with newer threads. Contamination from centuries of handling also skewed results. Later studies using more advanced methods suggested the linen fibers themselves could indeed be much older, possibly consistent with the 1st century. Thus, the controversy remains unresolved. But even if carbon dating raises doubts, other evidence, pollen from ancient Palestine, limestone dust matching Jerusalem, the impossibility of reproducing the image keeps the mystery alive. 3.4. Light, not paint. The most baffling aspect of the shroud is the image itself. Microscopic analysis shows no pigment, no brushstrokes, no dye. The coloration rests only on the outermost fibrils of the fabric, thinner than a human hair. It does not penetrate below the surface. It is as if the fibers themselves were scorched not by fire, but by light. Scientists have speculated about ultraviolet radiation, even bursts of energy unknown to physics. But the simplest explanation remains the most astonishing. Perhaps in the moment of resurrection, a burst of divine light imprinted the image on the cloth. As one researcher put it, the shroud is not the record of death. It is the snapshot of the resurrection. 3.5. The role of AI. In recent years, artificial intelligence has scanned the shroud, enhancing details invisible to the naked eye. The bruises became clearer, the contours of the body more defined. 3-dimensional reconstructions emerged, showing a man of Middle Eastern build, tortured and crucified. Yet even with AI, the essential question remains unanswered. How did the image form? Technology sharpens the mystery, but cannot dissolve it. As Rumi himself suggested, the shroud is not meant to be explained away. It is meant to confront us with the reality of Christ's passion and resurrection. Theology of the Shroud. A gospel written in cloth. The Shroud of Turin is not simply an artifact of devotion. It is in many ways a silent theology. Its fibers preach without words, carrying truths that theologians have articulated for centuries. If the Gospels are written testimonies, the shroud may be considered a visual gospel, a fifth testimony, composed in blood and light. 4.1. Good Friday imprinted.
Page 42.
At first glance, the shroud is a record of Good Friday.
Only in this chapter.
The scourging wounds match the Roman flagrum, a whip tipped with bone or metal designed to tear flesh. The rivulets of blood across the forehead testify to the crown of thorns. The puncture near the side corresponds to the soldier's lance. The bent knees, the collapsed body, the rigor of death all confirm what the evangelists wrote. He was crucified dead and buried. In this sense, the shroud is the closest thing we possess to a photograph of Christ's passion. Not staged, not interpreted, but imprinted. Every wound is a word, every stain a sentence, every fold a verse in the gospel of suffering love. 4.2. Easter Sunday encoded. But the shroud does not end with Good Friday. Its greatest mystery lies not in the marks of death, but in the inexplicable image that hovers above them. No human hand created it. No known natural process accounts for it. It is as though in the very moment of resurrection, the cloth bore witness to the burst of glory. Theologians call this the light of Tabor. The same divine radiance that once transfigured Christ on the mountain, now erupting in full force, illuminating the dark tomb and branding the cloth with the face of eternity. The shroud thus becomes the bridge between Friday and Sunday, between the silence of the grave and the song of life. 4.3. The new Adam and the new creation. Christian theology often compares Christ to Adam. In Eden, Adam's disobedience brought death into the world. In Gethsemane and on Calvary, Christ's obedience restored life. The shroud echoes this theology visually. The stains of blood recall the garden of sin, but the radiant image speaks of the garden of resurrection. Thus, the shroud is not merely about a dead man. It is about the rebirth of humanity. It testifies that sin's grip was broken, that death's dominion was undone. As St. Paul wrote, "Death, where is your sting, grave? Where is your victory?" 1 Cor 15:55. The answer is woven into the linen itself, spiritual symbolism, the face of God in the fabric. If the shroud were only a forensic puzzle, it would be fascinating, but not transformative. Its true power lies in its symbolism, the way it draws the believer into mystery, the way it turns cloth into icon, the way it allows humanity to gaze upon divinity. 5.1. The face that looks back. Every icon in Christian tradition seeks to mediate presence. The shroud, however, goes beyond iconography. It is not painted, but imprinted. To gaze upon it is to feel gazed upon. Pilgrims throughout centuries have reported the same sensation. The eyes of the man in the shroud seem to follow not accusing, but inviting. It is as though Christ himself were whispering, "I am here." Do you believe 5.2, the silence that speaks? The shroud says nothing, and yet in its silence it speaks louder than any homily. Its quiet presence confronts the human heart with questions no skeptic can silence. What if this is real? What if he really suffered this for me? What if the resurrection is not myth, but memory? Jonathan Rumi described this as the mystery of presence. For him, the shroud is not about proving or disproving. It is about standing in front of a silence so dense it becomes a voice. The linen becomes a pulpit. The stains become sacraments. 5.3. Light in darkness. In a world saturated with images, billboards, screens, endless photographs, the shroud remains unique. It is an image not produced by human ambition, but by divine humility. It does not sell. It does not advertise. It does not entertain. It reveals. It stands as light in darkness, a beacon reminding humanity that the central event of history is not empire, not invention, not conquest, but a man crucified, buried, and risen. 5.4. Belonging to Christ alone. Finally, Rumi's words echo again. It belongs to Jesus. The shroud resists every attempt to turn it into mere relic scientific curiosity or tourist attraction. It demands reverence because it belongs not to us, but to the one it reveals. And in belonging to Him, it calls us to belong to Him as well. To touch the shroud with faith is to touch the hem of Christ's garment, as the woman did in the gospel, who was healed by her belief. The shroud is not magic, but it is mystery. And mystery, when embraced, becomes transformation. The shroud's call to humanity. The Shroud of Turin is not content to be admired as a relic. It does not permit us to remain neutral. To look upon it is to feel summoned. 6.1. The universal question. The shroud confronts every heart with the same question Jesus asked His disciples. Who do you say that I am? For some, it is dismissed as clever forgery. For others, it is fascinating archaeology. But for those who allow themselves to be pierced by its gaze, the shroud is the face of Christ, asking for faith. Jonathan Rumi expressed this call with urgency. The shroud is not simply proof for historians, but invitation for souls. It belongs to Jesus, he said, meaning that its ultimate purpose is not to rest in a cathedral vault, but to lead hearts back to the living God. 6.2. Healing through wounds. The irony of the shroud is profound. It is covered in wounds, yet it heals. The image is bruised, scourged, bloodied, yet those who contemplate it find peace. The very sight of pain becomes the channel of comfort. The very vision of death becomes the seed of hope. This is the paradox of Christianity. By His wounds we are healed. The shroud carries this truth not as doctrine, but as demonstration. To stand before it is to feel one's own wounds, sins and griefs absorbed into the fabric of redemption. 6.3. The shroud in a secular age. In our world saturated with skepticism and cynicism, the shroud shines brighter. It does not demand blind faith, but invites honest searching. It whispers into the noise of a digital age, I am still here. Look closer. Believe. Even artificial intelligence scanning every thread cannot exhaust the mystery. Instead of disproving it, deepens. The closer science looks, the more the shroud slips beyond explanation. In a time when humanity believes it can master everything, the shroud humbles us. It reminds us that some truths are not conquered by reason, but received in reverence. A sacred icon for the end times. Many mystics have spoken of the shroud as a relic for the last days, a sign preserved through centuries for a generation that doubts everything. Whether or not this prophecy is literal, the symbolism is powerful. 7.1. A silent witness. In an age where words are twisted, the shroud does not argue. It simply is. Its silence is its strength. No debate, no manifesto, no polemic could equal the quiet testimony of that bruised face looking back through time. 7.2. Belonging to the whole world. Though it rests in Turin, the shroud belongs to no single city, nation, or church. If it belongs to Jesus, then it belongs to the whole world He died to save. Every pilgrim who kneels before it represents not only their own soul, but the longing of humanity for truth, for love, for God. 7.3. A mirror for our age. The shroud mirrors not only Christ's suffering, but our own. In its bruised features, we see the face of refugees, the poor, the oppressed, the victims of violence. We see the wounds of our century imprinted anew. And in its radiant mystery, we see the promise that beyond all suffering, resurrection waits. The face of Christ in linen. At the end of all studies, debates, and pilgrimages, one truth remains. The shroud belongs to Jesus. Not to scientists, not to skeptics, not to collectors, not even to the church as artifact. It belongs to Him whose image it bears, Him who died and rose, Him who is alive forevermore. Jonathan Rumi's testimony reminds us of this truth. As the man who portrays Jesus for millions, he points not to himself, but to the cloth that points beyond itself. The shroud is not about Jonathan Rumi, not even about Turin. It is about the eternal Christ, the God who entered history, who embraced suffering, who transfigured death into life. To stand before the shroud is to be drawn into that mystery. To look upon its image is to feel looked upon. To hear its silence is to hear the whisper of eternity.
Look at the energy readings.
Do you
That's
believe?
impossible. It can't
And so
be
across
stable at this
centuries, the
temperature.
shroud continues
We need
its
to run the
mission.
sequence again.
Fires could not consume it. Skeptics could not silence it. Science could not explain it. It endures because it is not simply fabric. It is testimony. It is gospel. It is icon. It is relic. Most of all, it is encounter. An encounter with the God who became man, with the man who became wounded, with the wounds that became our healing. In the end, perhaps the shroud was given for us, this skeptical, restless generation, not to remove the need for faith, but to awaken it. Not to erase doubt, but to plant a seed of wonder. Not to prove God, but to invite us into His presence. The shroud waits. Its faint image, fragile yet indestructible, continues to gaze upon humanity. And in that gaze, we hear the words Rumi echoed, "It belongs to Jesus." And because it belongs to Him, it calls us to belong to Him too.